Ladies and gentlemen, we have a new gold standard for Ocarina of Time modding. I've played many amazing Zelda mods and Rom hacks over the years, but this, my friends, is the uncontested new bar. Now, in the last video, we talked about Zelda Indigo Chapter 1, and I gave it very high praise, but Chapter 2 blows it away. It's both beyond creative as well as unbelievably intelligent with how it implements both legacy and brand new mechanics. Both chapters utilize the Zelda Ocarina of Time Decompilation project. Now, this grants the developers exponentially increased ability to add new enemies, designs, mechanics, and more. It's so beyond the original game that it feels divorced from the constraints of said game. Now, I'll get into the visuals more later too, but between the additional mechanics, a more detailed Link model, and the incredible texture work, it almost feels like a GameCube game? Kinda? Or at least a much more technically advanced N64 title that utilizes effects and features that the original developers hadn't even imagined yet. Granted, I'm also playing this on an emulator, so it's super crisp, and that might make my previous statement a little bit biased. Now, the name Chapter 2 is a little bit of a misnomer. It's not really a sequel, it's more akin to a refurbish, remake, and continuation of Chapter 1, so it's sort of a pseudo-sequel-ish. Not all areas in Chapter 1 exist in Chapter 2, but there is some overlap. However, these places and experiences have completely evolved. You don't need to play or have seen the last video to understand this one. However, I will put it in a card above and link below in case you're interested. But before we dive in too much, I want to give a big shout out to the sponsor of this video, the makers of this t-shirt right here, Into the AM. Now, Christmas is coming up, and if you haven't already, it is time to get holiday shopping. Into the AM has a cozy fall collection as well as comfortable and eccentric graphic tees. The designs range from subtle to loud, and I believe there is something for everyone's closet at Into the AM. Into the AM's clothing line is shrink resistant as well. This is a medium, it fits like a medium, and despite multiple washes and dries, it stays the same. I used to be really hesitant to buy custom graphic t-shirts online because it was kind of a waste of money for me. I'd purchase it, it would shrink up, and I couldn't utilize it anymore. But not with Into the AM. I can finally get my weird eccentric t-shirts again and not waste my money doing so. If you're interested, now's the time to buy one for yourself or for your loved one, and click the affiliate link below, which auto-populates the code H4G-AM for 10% off today. Now back to business, I absolutely must discuss the quality of life upgrades here. Some of which, of course, overlap with Chapter 1. Gotta start here since it'll probably help everyone better understand the footage and what Link is actually doing. First off, Link's run speed is way increased compared to the retail game, thank God. No more forward rolling everywhere in the desperate hopes that it'll be a touch quicker. Sometimes though it is too fast, but you can mitigate this by equipping your sword. An item will slow Link's speed down back to normal, and you can easily toggle back and forth based on your speed preferences. Speaking of toggling, you have two sets of C buttons. Now that's right, by pressing down on the D-pad, you can swap between your sets. 6 items at your disposal, always. Tunics and special boots can be set to your C buttons as well. Now, this seems like a simple adjustment, but the result is very significant. You spend less time in menu and more time actually playing the game. It also makes it less of a hassle to have multiple item puzzles. Chapter 1 starts off this way. Chapter 2 allows you to purchase an item that grants this ability, so it's a little bit more organic, I guess. Your fairy companion is Tail from Majora's Mask, and he actually is helpful. Many of the enemies here have very specific weaknesses, and I found myself frequently deferring to Tail for information. Now here is a big one. Pressing up C in the main menu actually brings up a separate settings menu, which really opens up the mechanics of the game even more. You can also turn off the HUD at any time, which I love. I'm always struggling to get good shots for thumbnails in Ocarina of Time because the HUD is almost always in the way. Here's me in Chapter 1 trying to frame the castle in such a way that the HUD isn't obscuring everything. It just helps so much to simply remove it. Another feature is the aim sensitivity. I always struggled with first-person perspective in Zelda 64, and on top of that, my PC N64 controller's joystick is a little touchy, so setting this to slow completely solved everything for me. Another option I played with a bit was the widescreen mode. Now, it looks cool, but personally not the way I like to play. It seems a bit too, distant and slightly wide-angle lens for me. Nothing quite as extreme as a fisheye lens, but definitely a bit perspectively weird with the foreground and the midground. It could just be me though. Either way, there's a lot of customization here, and I absolutely appreciate it. Now the story is as follows. Over a decade after the events of Majora's Mask, Link has resigned to a quiet life as a hermit in the mountains. However, a cataclysmic event has scarred the land, forcing him out of retirement and back into action. Each region he explores has a local hero, living or deceased, and Link must acquire their sigil before continuing. The overall story is typical Zelda stuff, but it gets more in the nitty-gritty as you visit the towns. In Chapter 1, you visit a Kokiri forest-type region. Link must acquire their fallen hero's sword to progress to the first dungeon, the long-deceased Great Deku Tree. Now, we don't receive much history or story here about the hero, aside from the fact that they defended the village. Again, this is all Chapter 1 footage. Here's Chapter 2. Look at the glow-up here. The monsters have invaded, and the Kokiri have fled to the safety of the treetops, their homes ravaged on the forest floor. This area is so vastly upgraded with NPCs, enemies, minigames, and more that it really doesn't feel like you're replaying Chapter 1 content at all. I love, however, that in both versions the villagers tell you not to disturb the spirit of the lost hero, just leave her alone, they say. After acquiring her sword, though, you're attacked, and you just gotta run away, otherwise this happens. Everyone's pissed. The shop owner hikes up the prices, etc. I played it both ways just to see the differences, and it's pretty hilarious. I love little touches like this. Speaking of the shop, if you try to explore around the counter, you get called out for doing the most Zelda thing imaginable, just searching for a few more rupees. However, if you kill the hero's spirit, you get a more aggressive version. From here, we might as well talk about the graphics and art design. Link's model has been upgraded compared to the OG Ocarina of Time, and so has essentially everything else. Everywhere you look, there's something original and seemingly more complex. Houses seem more lived in, towns seem more alive, there's movement and visual surprises everywhere. And like Chapter 1, there are areas that are hinted at that you can't quite get to yet, or at least not yet in this demo. This is also true for the enemies, many of which are brought over from other Zelda titles. Here are some examples. Now, I especially enjoy these candle guys because they just lose their minds when they're lit up. Now, in the last video on Chapter 1, I mentioned the fast zombie re-dead. We have these here, but we also have re-deads that you absolutely must kill with fire. Otherwise, they come back to life, over and over and over again. They don't sprint per se, but they'll chase you in a herd across the map, and they will cheer each other on as one of them murders you. In the final area, they are everywhere. They are the bane of my existence. Luckily, you also have new tools to deal with these new enemies. The Rock's Feather allows you to jump, adding platforming potential. Here's a cave where you're actually on a 2D plane and you get to use that feather. Wearing the Pegasus boot swaps your charged spin attack with a magical dash, and whole minigames are now built around this feature. Not to mention it also provides an alternative to jumping. The shovel allows you to dig. The flippers allow for more fluid swimming, as you'd imagine. There's an anchor that allows you to smash enemies. Shields are enhanced with magic now, either offensive or defensive. But most importantly, there is the Magic Lantern. It uses magic and allows you to kill re-deads without lit Deku sticks. You must play so much of the final area without this item, you feel so powerless initially. In fact, here's me trying to light a stick to slay a re-dead. It's frustrating, but once you can generate fire, you feel so incredibly powerful. But if you run out of magic, God help you. In addition to unexpected items, there is unexpected gameplay and mechanics. Switches on walls instead of the floor, cannons, hidden passageways, etc., etc. Honestly, there's adventure and secrets around every corner, just as you'd expect and desire from a true Zelda game. Now that's a lot of positive, but I do have some critiques for Indigo Chapter 2. There are a few spots that I think need to be tweaked, mainly in the last area of the game. For reference, this is a ghost town where the villagers have been slowly turned into zombie re-deads by dark magic. Those that escaped the spell died in hiding. It's dark and frankly, pretty fascinating. There's a main village, a graveyard, and a mansion. All have interconnected puzzles. So firstly, aside from the re-dead hordes I mentioned earlier, there are some random difficulty spikes that rely on you to know exactly what's coming and when. Take this boss fight, for example. It's not hard, but then this happens. In the developer playthrough posted on YouTube, he positions himself perfectly for a spinning charged sword attack. He executes the attack with precise timing and returns to the boss fight near immediately. Even after knowing what I was supposed to do, I couldn't pull it off, and had to, mostly unsuccessfully, pick off the wall masters one by one, which was much easier said than done when they're all rushing you. Similar difficulty comes with the timed puzzles. Here's an instance where I need to clear out a re-dead with a fire, light a Deku stick, and light torches. However, the timing must be pitch perfect to make it. It seems easy, but there's no leeway. If you waste a step, the first torch goes out and the whole sequence needs to begin again. Tight timing can be fun, but this was just kind of stressful. Now lastly, and I'm a little torn on this one, but the brightness is just too dark in some areas. I can't see. I'm hesitant to critique this because it's realistic. There's not really supposed to be that many light sources in an abandoned town, but at the same time I found myself cranking up my monitor's brightness settings to be able to navigate certain areas at all. For example, here's a shop of sorts. It is lit with light sources, but it still gives off a sense of being shadowy. Walk outside and you're kind of blind. There are 3 re-deads in this house. I've killed 2. There's one more. I'm facing it. Can you see it? Again, now I unlocked a chest, but I can't find it. Here's the normal brightness. Now I'm bumping it up. It's against the wall. Now, this does build a sense of unease, which is appropriate for the setting, but I just feel like it's too much in certain places. I want to be scared, I don't want to be blind. Now, I'm sure some players will dig this aesthetic more than myself, which is totally fine. I just got tired of toggling my brightness settings. I also encountered a few glitches. Now, these aren't really critiques because this is just a demo, it's a work in progress, but just more so letting people know. The bigger one I saw was after the request to fetch goo. I had previously gone into this goo fountain area without talking to the goo monster first, and Tail wouldn't let me bottle any yet. So I left, talked to the goo boy, I think it's a buzz blob, can't remember, and I returned to the cave, and as I used the Roc's Feather to jump into the entrance of the cave, I suddenly got the bottled goo, but it replaced my Roc's Feather with seemingly no way to get it back. Once you do deliver the goo though, it is delightfully insane. And I think delightful is a great way to describe this title, both for everything that it does originally, and also everything that it brings in from other games within the series. Oops, I think I accidentally just killed a Minish. This game just feels creatively fresh, while simultaneously being visually stunning. After completing the game, I found myself exploring more just to see what I could run into. It feels kind of like Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom in that way. There's just a little something around every corner to find. Overall, the demo took me 8 hours to complete, and apparently I had plenty more to discover. However, I also wandered around a lot and messed with the settings to get fun shots for the episode, so it probably took me a little longer than most people would take. In the developer commentary video, they take just under 4 hours, but that's also with an intimate pre-understanding of how to solve each and every puzzle. From what I'm seeing, the actual average is anywhere between like 5 and 6.5 hours, which, again, is a ton of game packed within one demo. So, I think this is going to be huge. And there are just so many places Link can't even go yet, be it a house, an area, like a full-on section of the world. There's so much that's going to be added, and I'm incredibly excited to see where it goes. I already feel like Chapter 1 and 2 were time very well spent, and I can't imagine how grandiose the final product will be. Either way, go ahead, download this now. You're going to enjoy it. Aside from that, thank you so much for watching, subscribing, hitting that notification bell. It truly does help the channel grow, and I hope to see you all back for the next one.